My name is Alice, and I'm 28 years old. I work with kids. I recently got engaged to my boyfriend Tom. This is my first time visiting his parents' house. Tom went to a really good university and has a cool job at a big company. He's super smart and everyone respects him at work. I've always looked up to him. His dad seems happy about us getting married and even mentioned how they've never had a daughter and his wife will be excited. But I noticed that Tom's mom, who was sitting next to him, didn't seem too happy. It's been bothering me. She looked like she was mad, her face all scrunched up. Then out of nowhere, she asks, "I heard you didn't finish high school, is that true? Our Tom is top-notch, graduated from a big-shot university. Do you really think I'd be okay with him marrying someone like you?" Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. "Mom, that's really uncalled for." "You're being mean to Alice," I said, defending my fiancé. "Yeah, Mom, what matters is how we feel about each other," Tom chimed in. Both Tom and his dad had my back, but it only seemed to make her angrier. Isn't it normal for a mom to care about who her son is marrying? Kids take after their moms, right? "I want the best for my family," she argued, not backing down. It seemed like she wasn't going to accept me, a high school dropout, because she wanted the best for her kids. Some people really care about what degrees you have, and parents often value education a lot. It felt really disheartening to be judged just because I didn't finish high school. But there's more to my story. I didn't drop out for no reason. After my dad died in a car crash, my mom struggled to take care of me and my twin sister, Emma. I had to step up and start working after middle school to help out. Now, I'm going to night school to get my diploma. I'm also saving up money, and I might even go to college someday. Tom is totally on board with this plan and has offered to pitch in for my college expenses. He understands where I'm coming from, and he's always been supportive. It's one of the reasons I fell for him. But it seems like my future mother-in-law isn't too happy about it. Tom doesn't have any siblings, so we'll be moving in with his parents eventually. I'm a bit anxious about how that's going to work out. A while later, I moved into their house with only a month left until our wedding. As the big day got closer, I had to make frequent trips to the venue for final checks and arrange hotels for our out-of-town guests. Between work, school, and wedding planning, I was swamped. But my mother-in-law didn't seem too happy with how I was handling things. Today, as I was putting on makeup to go to the venue, she suddenly exclaimed, "Oh my, what are you wearing?" She couldn't help commenting on my outfit. "I'm getting ready to go to the venue, so I wanted to look nice," I explained. Whether she was unhappy with me dressing up for the occasion or just looking for an excuse to criticize me, I couldn't tell. You said you're going to the venue, but you're dressed like that just to catch some attention, aren't you? You should be more careful," she remarked. She just assumed I was meeting up with a guy instead of going to the venue. I was stunned. I assured her I was meeting Tom at the venue and suggested she ask him if she had doubts. But she wouldn't listen and insisted I was meeting someone else. Then, out of nowhere, she messed up my carefully styled hair. "What are you doing, Mom?" "I spent ages on my hair. Now it's ruined," I protested. With my hair all messy, I couldn't leave like that, so I had to fix it. But instead of apologizing, she said, "Don't bother fixing it. This messy look suits a dropout like you. You should wear it like this for the wedding." I was already running late, so I quickly fixed my hair and headed to the venue, where Tom was waiting. He noticed something was off with me, but I didn't want to bring up what happened with his mom before discussing the ceremony, so I kept quiet about what happened with Tom for now. Then, as the wedding day drew closer, my mother-in-law surprised us with a suggestion. "Hey, doesn't Alice's mom live far away? It must be hard for her to come and stay in a hotel. Why not have her stay with us?" Tom and I were taken aback by her sudden offer. It seemed like a good idea to save money on hotel bills and help our families bond. Tom thought I should talk to my mom about it, so I did. My mom was thrilled with the idea, and we decided to bring my twin sister, Emma, along too. At first, I thought my mother-in-law was being kind, but I had no idea what she would do next. The day before the wedding, my mom and sister arrived to stay at my in-laws' house. Seeing my mom and sister, who I hadn't seen in ages, brought me so much joy. My bond with my sister is super tight, and we were thrilled to be together again. We decided to share a room for the night. Emma, who had a bit to drink, was out like a light as soon as she hit the pillow. Once she's out, I chuckled to myself. Just as I was thinking of hitting the hay too, I heard the door creak open. Wondering who it could be, I heard a loud buzzing noise and the sound of hair being shaved. "Now you won't be showing up at the ceremony tomorrow, will you? No me for hair on a dropout like you," my mother-in-law said. I was stunned. I quickly flipped on the lights and exclaimed, "Mother-in-law, what on earth are you doing?" The person in the bed suddenly sat up, surprising us both. "Huh? Mother-in-law, you've got the wrong person. I'm Alice," I clarified, realizing she mistook me for Emma. "I'm sorry, Mom, but it's not my hair. Emma and I are twins, and we look really similar," I clarified. "But it wasn't me who got her hair shaved. It was my sister, Emma." "What? No way. Why didn't it happen to Alice?" My mother-in-law was clearly shocked, but Emma, who had a bit too much to drink, was fast asleep. When she wakes up and sees her shaved head in the morning, she'll definitely be furious. Emma's got a fiery temper, so it's pretty obvious she'll be mad as heck. "What are you going to do now, Mom?" "I can't cover for you," I admitted, feeling guilty. Maybe my mother-in-law left the room looking pale. The next morning, when Emma saw herself in the mirror and realized she was bald, she was both shocked and furious. Our mom, who was there, couldn't hold back her tears, and Tom looked really upset. "This is awful. Who could have done such a thing?" So I spilled the beans about what happened the previous day in front of everyone. I wondered how my mother-in-law would react when she woke up, but she wasn't around. My father-in-law told me she had mentioned going for an early morning walk and hadn't come back yet. I started to worry that she might have left, so I decided to tell our family everything and began looking for her. About 30 minutes later, a relative called to say they found her at a nearby convenience store, and my father-in-law went to get her. When she got back home, seemingly unaware of the search, she immediately started making excuses. "I didn't do anything wrong. It's all Alice's fault. She used the clippers herself and shaved Emma's hair while she was sleeping," she claimed, much to my surprise. My mother-in-law was trying to blame me for everything, which left me completely stunned. I couldn't hold back and retorted, "That's absurd. I didn't do anything wrong. Weren't you the one who entered the room yesterday? It's unbelievable that you're still lying." But she was adamant about not admitting her mistake. Then my father-in-law seemed to recall something and went outside, returning with something in his hand. "Alice, could this be the clipper?" As I looked at the clipper he held, it was unmistakably the one my mother-in-law used to shave off Emma's hair last night. "That's it. That's the clipper." But where was it? It turned out that the clipper originally belonged to my father-in-law, who always cared about his appearance and carried grooming tools with him. When they checked the car, where he kept his grooming tools, they found it had been rummaged through and the clipper was missing. I always leave my car keys in the bedroom. "If there's brown hair in this clipper, then it's clear your mom is the culprit," he stated as he began to disassemble the clipper. The clipper contained unmistakable brown hair, clearly from Emma. She must have hurriedly left in the dark and didn't properly clean up the hair, my mother-in-law admitted, dropping to her knees as she noticed the evidence. "Alice, it's all your fault. You, a dropout with no money, tricked intelligent Tom. I wanted you out of Tom's life at any cost," she'd accused, leaving me feeling disgusted by her selfishness. Emma, who was most affected by her actions, was furious. "I don't care about your excuses. What are you going to do about this? I can't go to the wedding like this," she demanded. Upon hearing Emma's distress, my father-in-law made a quick call. Luckily, a friend who was a hairstylist agreed to come over immediately with a wig. While this would temporarily solve Emma's hair dilemma, we couldn't just ignore what my mother-in-law had done. 30 minutes later, father-in-law's friend arrived with the wig, and Emma's hair looked lovely again. Initially, father-in-law contemplated shaving my mother-in-law's hair like he did with Emma, but he decided it wouldn't provide a sense of closure. Instead, he chose to confront my mother-in-law's wrongdoing in front of everyone. Among the guests invited were the landlords to whom my mother-in-law's parents had been indebted for generations. They had a good rapport with father-in-law, and news of this incident would undoubtedly affect my mother-in-law's parents' living situation. You see, these landlords, who were close friends of my in-laws, had been giving them a discounted rent. However, upon learning about my mother-in-law's actions, the landlord, known for his integrity, would likely revert the rent to its original rate or even consider eviction. My mother-in-law's parents, who are financially strained, would then have no choice but to seek refuge with my mother-in-law. However, Tom had previously mentioned that my mother-in-law didn't have a good relationship with her parents and wouldn't be willing to assist them. For my mother-in-law, having her parents move in would be the start of a living nightmare. Wait, please. I'll be in deep trouble if you do that. I'm sorry, it was all my fault, she pleaded. I made a terrible mistake, and I'm deeply sorry, Emma. I'll compensate you for the damage. Please forgive me, my mother-in-law pleaded, repeatedly apologizing as she pressed her forehead against the floor. However, despite her apologies, Emma's hair couldn't magically grow back. After discussing it, we decided that my father-in-law and Tom would disclose my mother-in-law's actions. Emma had already agreed to this. Initially, my mother-in-law refused to attend the wedding and attempted to flee, but Emma and Tom prevented her from escaping. When we arrived at the venue, relatives who had been informed of the situation through messages approached us, looking extremely concerned. In front of our relatives, we exposed my mother-in-law's wrongdoing, and Emma bravely removed her wig to reveal her bald head. Everyone was shocked by Emma's appearance, especially the women, who expressed disbelief. For a woman, hair is often considered vital, so the sudden loss due to shaving was particularly distressing. Some people couldn't help but shed tears as they thought of Emma's ordeal. As expected, the landlord confronted my mother-in-law, asking if the accusations were true. Initially, she tried to deny it, but under pressure from my father-in-law, she eventually admitted her wrongdoing. The landlord, visibly angry, faced criticism from the women present as well. Throughout the ceremony, my usually spirited mother-in-law remained downcast, a stark contrast to her usual self. Despite this, the wedding proceeded smoothly, and we were blessed by the well wishes of many attendees. However, it became clear that we could no longer reside with my mother-in-law in that house. Therefore, we made the decision to move into our own apartment and start our life as a couple. Although my mother-in-law panicked at the thought of us leaving, pleading with us not to go, we knew we couldn't continue living with her. My father-in-law shared the same sentiment. He informed my mother-in-law that he intended to divorce her and asked her to vacate the premises. Upon hearing this, my mother-in-law turned pale and clung to him, begging for reconsideration. She expressed concerns about where she would live, given her strained relationship with her own parents. She appeared visibly distressed, as if on the verge of collapsing. However, despite her pleas, we prioritized Emma's well-being. The fact that my own hair had been shaved off while I slept, mistaken for Emma, was a jarring realization. Despite my mother-in-law's persistent attempts to persuade us otherwise, my father-in-law contacted her parents and she reluctantly agreed to leave the house. Currently, my mother-in-law is residing with her estranged parents, where she appears to be tending to their needs. However, it seems her parents possess challenging personalities and my mother-in-law is feeling overwhelmed by their demands. Despite reaching out to us multiple times, expressing her desire for a fresh start, we have no intention of reconciling with her, so we've chosen to block her calls. Presently, my husband and I are enjoying a happy life alongside my father-in-law in his home. Recognizing that the house was quite outdated, we embarked on a renovation project together. My father-in-law constructed his dream study, my husband created a space to showcase his model figures, and I focused on installing a modern, state-of-the-art kitchen. Naturally, we also prepared a room for our future child, and now the three of us are residing comfortably. Emma's hair, which was shaved during the ordeal, has since grown into a stylish short haircut, receiving praise from her friends as a positive transformation. She often jokes about the incident with her friends, which stirs up conflicting emotions for me. Nonetheless, Emma occasionally visits our family home for sleepovers, which I eagerly anticipate. While challenges may arise in the future, I am confident that with our collective efforts, we can overcome them together. In the hospital for just a fracture. Pause. Acting like a child. You need to pull yourself together. Get up and make dinner, or else. We're done. How could anyone react that way to news of their wife in the hospital instead of expressing worry first? Most wouldn't get it, but this is my husband. I can't handle it anymore. I was at my wit's end, but there was someone even angrier with my husband than I was. That turned out to be his own parents. I wonder how he'll respond when they intervene. I'm Eileen, 29 years old. I landed a job at a well-regarded company right after finishing college, even though I don't work at The main office, my salary's quite good. My husband Matt is 32. We met at a client's office, and after a few meetings, he took the initiative to swap numbers. He later invited me to dinner, and after dating for a year and a half, we took the plunge when he proposed. Looking me in the eye, he said, "I want to spend my life with you. Eileen, will you marry me? I'm happy, but are you sure about us?" "I want you, Eileen. You're the only one who makes me feel truly happy when we're together, Matt. Thank you. I want to spend my life with you, too." We were showered with blessings at our wedding and pledged to love each other forever. But 2 years later, if asked if love still exists between us, we couldn't confidently say yes. The reason is simple. Matt has changed in these 2 years. It started with something small. Since we got married, he began gradually shifting household responsibilities to me. We had agreed to split chores evenly, since we were both working before we got married. Despite this, Matt had stopped doing his share of chores like cleaning the bathroom and washing the dishes. Initially, he would reluctantly do them when I reminded him, but gradually, he stopped doing them altogether, even when asked. This increased my workload. Over time, extra hours at work piled up, eating into my sleep. Exhausted both mentally and physically, I decided to talk to Matt about it. When I got home, he was already lounging on the couch with a beer in hand. He didn't even acknowledge me. Despite my frustration, I approached calmly. "Hey, Matt, there's something we need to discuss." Keeping his eyes fixed on the TV, he replied, "What is it?" I took the remote from his hand and turned off the TV. "Hey, what are you doing?" "I was watching that." My husband jumped up, raising his voice. "I told you I wanted to talk, right? It's important. Please listen." "What a bother. So what's this about?" "I'm not exactly swimming in free time, you know." "Free time? You've been glued to the TV and drinking beer." Holding back the urge to yell, I kept my cool and pressed on. "Matt, you haven't been pitching in around the house lately, have you?" "Why not? We agreed to share chores since we both work, didn't we?" "Isn't it obvious? Doing housework isn't my job." "What do you mean? Cleaning the bathroom and doing dishes were your responsibilities, weren't they? Why should I, as a husband, have to do that? Those tasks are for women." "Wait, are you serious? You were the one who suggested we split the chores." "That was just for show to look like a good husband. Isn't it clear? At our wedding, you've even told everyone I'm so lucky my husband helps around the house. That was the whole point." Haha. "So, you're saying you only helped out to improve your image during the wedding?" With a smirk, my husband said, "Exactly." I was stunned by my husband's words, unable to comprehend such audacity. "I'm exhausted from working late too. After getting home later than you, how could you say something like that to me? Just a reminder, you're not exactly a beauty queen, okay?" "What? Why are you bringing this up now? What does my appearance have to do with this discussion? Someone as ordinary as me should be grateful to have married someone like you, and you're complaining about simple chores? Know your place." "Matt," my husband shouted and turned on the TV without waiting for my response. He took a sip of his half-empty beer and casually shifted his focus away from me. I couldn't believe it. I'm working late too, so how could he say such things? No matter how I look at it, that's just wrong. I wanted to say a lot, but speaking up now would only lead to a fight. To calm myself, I went straight to bed after taking a bath that night. Since then, I tried repeatedly to talk to Matt, but was always brushed off. Every attempt at conversation was met with, "Don't tell me what to do," leaving no room for discussion. It seemed Matt avoided me, often leaving the house on his days off. Naturally, he neglected housework, even on my days off, leaving me to handle it all at once. Time passed, and as my job entered a busy period, my overtime hours increased significantly. Then Matt exploded again in anger. "Hey, do you know what time it is? Where's my dinner?" Matt started yelling the moment I returned Home after a 3-hour overtime shift. I told you this morning I'd be working late today, so you should either cook or get takeout. What? Are you serious? Why do I have to cook? I wouldn't mind takeout, but do we even have money for that? Are you going to pay? Why should I? I'm busy too, so can you help out a bit? The mention of busy seemed to trigger him. He kicked the table leg and snapped at me with a furious look. I don't care if you're busy. You're always doing overtime because you can't manage your time. It's not that. My workload at work is really heavy right now. Don't act like you're all that just because you can handle a bit of work. You should just do what I tell you, you foolish woman. From that day on, I kept my distance from Matt to avoid his scolding. I prepared dinner ahead of time on days I knew I'd be working late. I also took on all the housework on my days off. Looking back, maybe I should have left him right then and there. But even then, I couldn't bring myself to truly hate him. Living like this, my burden gradually became too much to bear. After 2 months, both my body and mind were exhausted, and I lost my motivation for work. One day, on my way to work, I slipped on the subway stairs and fell. Though I remained conscious, I lay immobile, ripped by pain, and had to be transported by ambulance. Even upon reaching the hospital, the agony persisted, restricting my movement. After completing all the tests, the doctor entered my room and said, "You fractured your leg and have bruises on your arm and back. You must be in a lot of pain." "Yes, I can't move as freely as I'd like. You may be in this state for a few days. You look pale. Have you been feeling tired?" Anyway, I'll need to stay in the hospital for a while. Should I inform my family?" "Yes, please do." As I checked my phone, a message from a colleague awaited me. They had witnessed the ambulance taking me away from the subway station. They had already informed my workplace and contacted Matt, my husband. Exhausted from the day's events, relief washed over me, and I drifted into a deep sleep. Hours later, my phone buzzed, waking me up. Matt's name lit up the screen. Perhaps he was calling out of concern. With a mix of curiosity and apprehension, I answered, "Hello." "Hey, where have you been? Come home right now." Confused by Matt's raised voice, I couldn't hide my confusion. "Wait, didn't you hear? What's going on?" "I had an accident at the station. I'm in the hospital now. I fractured my leg and they're admitting me." After a brief silence, he exploded. "Are you kidding me? Hospitalized? You're not using this as an excuse to avoid doing chores, are you?" "What? No. Why would I lie about something like this? Didn't the office contact you?" "No calls came through. Even if you're trying to trick me, it won't work. And even if it's true, it's not my problem. Just come back and make dinner, all right?" "What?" "Hold on, Matt." My words were cut off as he abruptly ended the call. How could he be so dismissive? Isn't it normal to be concerned when your spouse is hospitalized? Am I just here for Matt to delegate chores to? Exhausted, I lay back down on the bed. A message from Matt popped up on my phone. "If you're not coming home, I'll order takeout. You're paying." As soon as I read the stark, emotionless message, clarity washed over me. It was foolish to dwell on this any longer. Just as I was contemplating divorce, there came a knock on my hospital room door. When I saw who entered, I couldn't believe my eyes. My father-in-law and mother-in-law. "What are you doing here?" My in-laws lived far away and hadn't been close to Matt for some time. After we got married, I rarely saw them, maybe once a year at most. Their unexpected presence baffled me. Seeing my confusion, my mother-in-law spoke gently. "Eileen, we heard you were taken to the hospital in an ambulance. We were worried." "How did you find out?" "We received a call from your office." "Huh. But my office tried to reach Matt several times before contacting you. He didn't answer any calls, so they reached out to his childhood home, which was listed as an emergency contact. That's why you're here." Their unexpected kindness brought tears to my eyes. I was genuinely touched that they had come all this way out of concern for me. Holding back my emotions, I gratefully lowered my head to Matt's parents. "Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, thank you so much." "It's all right, dear. We're family. But where is Matt?" You mean he hasn't arrived?" "No." They seemed surprised by my answer. Just then, my phone rang. It was Matt calling. "Hello. What's wrong with you?" Are you really not planning to come back? Matt's sudden outburst caught Mr. and Mrs. Johnson off guard, and they exchanged worried glances. I gestured for them to stay quiet, placing my finger on my lips. They nodded silently, and I responded to Matt. I've been admitted to the hospital. I won't be able to come home for a few days. Hospitalized for a fracture. Stop being so delicate. Get yourself out of there and make some food. Mrs. Johnson looked ready to protest, but Mr. Johnson held her back. Matt continued ranting, unaware his parents were listening. Just so you know, if you don't, we're getting a divorce, okay? A divorce? Are you serious? Of course. Why wouldn't I be? There's no reason to stay with someone like you who not only lacks attractiveness, but also neglects their household duties. Haha. His laughter over the phone left me speechless, stunned by his callousness. Isn't this going too far? He had always belittled others. I had to respond. Hey, are you serious saying things like that? Your parents are furious. What are you talking about? His response was light-hearted, as if he thought it was a joke. I handed my phone to my in-laws and let them take over. They unleashed a fierce reprimand through the phone. Matt, how could you say such things to Eileen? How can you be so heartless when your wife is in the hospital? We don't even recognize you as our son anymore. You're disowned. Wait, hold on, it's not what you think. There's a reason for this. There's no excuse for your behavior. All you do is spew venom. I'm ashamed to call you my son. Apologize to Eileen right now. Feeling cornered by his parents, my husband suddenly turned on me. Eileen, enough. Using my mom and dad like this. Exploiting them. It's your fault for not answering your company's call, isn't it? That's why they had to get involved. They called that number from your office. How misleading. Fine, I'll divorce you. Are you okay with that? I released all the pent-up anger and resentment, standing my ground. Divorce? Bring it on. I want nothing to do with a man like you. How long will you continue to think you're above everyone else? I have no reason to stay married to you anymore. If you understand that, never show your face to me again. Get lost, you piece of garbage. Following the divorce from my husband Matt, he initially hesitated, but with the help of my in-laws recommending a divorce attorney, we managed to separate amicably. The divorce brought significant changes to Matt's life. He began eating out for every meal, and his health declined. Unable to manage his laundry, I heard he showed up to work in wrinkled suits and shirts. Consequently, his reputation among coworkers took a nosedive. Did you hear? He didn't even visit his wife in the hospital. That's pretty messed up. Well, no wonder she left him. Ha ha ha. Over time, Matt began to skip work without giving any notice. With no one supporting him, it seemed inevitable that he would soon be pushed to resign. On the contrary, I was discharged from the hospital and returned to my usual work routine. Despite now being divorced, my job kept me occupied, lessening the impact more than I had anticipated. Moving forward, if I have the chance to meet someone new, I'll carefully evaluate them to ensure I find genuine happiness next time. My name is Ava, and I am 34 years old. I live with my husband James, and we both work for the company founded by my father-in-law. Although he is now retired, my father-in-law single-handedly transformed a small construction firm into an enterprise generating $250 billion in annual revenue. He even acquired rival companies, and while his methods could be forceful, everyone admired his remarkable business acumen. James, chosen to follow in his father's footsteps, was raised in a pampered environment and possesses a gentle nature. However, I fear his gentleness isn't suited for the cutthroat world of business. While gentle may sound pleasant, in reality, he is incredibly indecisive. I've started to doubt his suitability as a husband, let alone a CEO. James himself has admitted, I'm not cut out to be a CEO. I'll probably just be a figurehead if I become one. It's easier for me that way. His lack of serious intention to take over the company has left me frustrated after 5 years of marriage. In stark contrast to James, I consider myself quite decisive. During his active years, my father-in-law appreciated this quality in me and entrusted me with various tasks. Before marrying James, I worked at a bank where I managed finances and always kept numbers in mind. I planned to become a full-time homemaker after our wedding, but my father-in-law requested that I join the construction company instead. Soon after I started working there, he began inviting me to board meetings and seeking my opinions on management matters. Initially, the board members were skeptical about including the founder's daughter-in-law in such important discussions. However, as I consistently offered valuable insights, they began to listen to my suggestions. Despite James being a board member, he rarely attended meetings, and this was accepted as the norm by the board and my father-in-law. One day, after returning home from a meeting, I found James nonchalantly watching TV. "Why didn't you attend today's meeting?" I asked. I asked angrily. "You're a key member, you should take it seriously." Without showing any remorse, he retorted, "Even if I attend, I don't really understand the discussions. Besides, the board members prefer you, so there's no problem, right?" I wondered if he was irritated by my participation in the board meetings. Despite his remarks, my father-in-law had been teaching me the intricacies of running the business and seemed to be grooming me as his successor. I had started enjoying my involvement in management, and before I knew it, I was working hard to meet my father-in-law's expectations. About 2 years after I started attending meetings, my father-in-law retired completely. Whenever there were major decisions to be made, the board members would consult me while James was sidelined. I had hoped that being in such a situation would spur James to work harder, but instead, he became even more disengaged from his work. Although he would come to the office in the morning, he would disappear somewhere by noon and stay home for the rest of the day. When he saw me at home, he wouldn't talk about work at all, seemingly indifferent to the company's affairs. Meanwhile, my workload at the company was increasing, and I was getting busier. After my father-in-law's retirement, the board members relied on me more and more, and I was tasked with duties akin to those of a CEO. Given that we were a large company with many employees, I was committed to increasing sales and profits for the sake of our workers. With the hard work of our employees, our sales began to grow. I found running the company more interesting and became more engrossed in my work. Conversely, my husband James seemed to be losing interest in his work, and his appearances at the company began to diminish. The conversations between us at home lessened, and our relationship became increasingly tense. Around that time, our lives took a different turn. James came home and casually mentioned, "I ran into your sister Megan today and we had lunch together." Megan, 2 years older than me, had just divorced about 6 months ago due to her infidelity. This led to a big commotion when her enraged husband stormed our parents' home. My husband James went to my parents' house to calm down Megan's husband in my place as I was busy with work. With his gentle upbringing and calming personality, James managed to convince Megan's furious husband to leave for the time being. Later, Megan told me, "Your husband is really something. He handled my raging husband so effortlessly." She praised James. Megan's husband, in his anger, must have been disarmed by James' calm and easygoing demeanor. Megan was able to divorce her husband after paying alimony, but since this incident, she seemed to look at James differently. Until then, she had thought of James, who was not particularly attractive and quite indecisive, as just a rich, pampered son. After the incident, she seemed to believe he was a respectable business owner. Now, single after her divorce, Megan probably saw James as a great catch, given her love for wealthy men. However, I, engrossed in work, couldn't imagine such a thing. Of course, my sister wouldn't have known that James is just a nominal executive who doesn't actually manage the company. Megan's ex-husband was an elite employee of a foreign company. At their wedding, she had bragged to me, "My husband is an excellent employee with a high salary, and on top of that, he's handsome. You're jealous, aren't you?" Her ex-husband was handsome, smart, and carried a stylish vibe. I couldn't understand why she would cheat on such a wonderful husband. 3 months after hearing from James that he had lunch with Megan, I returned home to find James unusually serious. "I have something to discuss," he said. It was the first time I had heard such words from him, and I had a bad premonition. With my heart pounding, I waited for him to speak. "Actually, Megan is pregnant with my child, and I want a divorce." I was shocked by the request for a divorce, but even more surprised to hear that Megan was pregnant. At a loss for words, I listened as James continued. "Megan is planning to come over on our next day off to discuss this, so I'm counting on you." Stunned, I asked, "So you want to marry my sister?" With a troubled look, James responded, "It's not that I want to marry her, but if she's having my baby, I guess I have no choice." I sighed at James' typical indecisiveness and replied, "Well, if she's carrying your baby, I suppose it can't be helped. Let's discuss this when she comes over." It seemed like my husband and I couldn't make any decisions together, so I decided to meet directly with my sister to figure things out. Even though I had already made up my mind to divorce, I thought I needed to consult my father-in-law about the company's situation. As the daughter-in-law of the founder, I was involved in running the business, but if I divorced, I would become a stranger. The next day, I went to my in-law's house and told my father-in-law exactly what my husband had said. My mother-in-law, who was present, was thrilled at the news of her son having a child but quickly quieted down when glared at by my father-in-law. She seemed more concerned about her grandchild than the company's management. After some thought, my father-in-law said with a smile, "Ava, I want you to continue to be involved in the company's management as you have been. I don't care about James. I'll take the responsibility, so let him do what he likes." It seemed that my father-in-law valued the management of the company more than his son or grandchild. Even though he had retired, he still had a strong voice in the company, and since he held most of the company's shares, no executives would go against his will. I was also interested in my work and reluctant to give it up now. With my job settled, it was time to discuss the future with my sister. On my day off, my sister came to my house with a big smile. "Ava, it's a pity you couldn't have a baby. I'll give you plenty of consolation money. Please leave this house immediately," she said with a triumphant air. My husband sat silently, listening to our conversation without saying anything despite being the one who caused the problem. I was appalled at his indifferent face. "It's okay to get divorced," I said, "but there's also the issue of alimony and division of property. Let's bring in a lawyer and decide properly." "I never thought you, my sister, would fall for a man like James," I retorted to my sister with irony. She glared at me with a stern face for a moment, but quickly regained her composure. I finally realized that it's not about looks in men, it's about what's inside. It was funny to hear my sister talk as if she fully understood my husband's inner self. Holding back my laughter, I replied, "That's great, isn't it? From now on, live happily with James." The inner self my sister was talking about was likely money. She seemed to be under the impression that my husband was the president of my father-in-law's company, but it didn't seem like she had heard anything from him. When the discussion was over, my sister said she would start living here and brought a moving company. Though I only took out the necessary items, knowing my quick-tempered sister, I had already arranged for a new apartment. I also hired a lawyer and had documents prepared for the division of property and claims for alimony. The next day, after moving out my belongings, I started negotiations for alimony and division of property with my husband and sister, accompanied by my lawyer. My husband was still present that day, sitting with an indifferent face, and only my sister was speaking. "As I said before, I'm willing to pay as much alimony as you want, so please decide at your convenience." Hearing my sister's words, my lawyer decided to also claim alimony against my sister in addition to my husband. My sister was still paying alimony in installments to her ex-husband, so my lawyer had said in advance that it might be impossible to claim alimony from her. But since she said she would pay me as much as I wanted, I decided to make a claim. When it came to negotiations about the division of property, my sister excitedly said, "This mansion is originally James's family's, so it shouldn't be part of the division of property, right?" The lawyer answered my sister emotionlessly, "This building and the land belong to the company, so it's up to the company to decide." Even my husband seemed surprised by this. "Is that so? I thought this house was Dad's," he said casually. My sister, on the other hand, was taken aback and attacked the lawyer. "Wait a minute, so does that mean I can't live in this house?" The lawyer responded in a businesslike manner, "Since it's company property, you can continue to live here if the company allows it." At this comment, my sister seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. "Oh, you should have said that earlier. It'll be fine since James, the president, will be living here." The lawyer looked surprised for a moment, then burst into laughter. "What are you talking about? Ava is the president, not James." Seeing my sister, who was planning to remarry my husband yet didn't even know that fact, made me laugh. My sister immediately turned to my husband and yelled, "Ha, James, you're not the president." I stepped in for my husband, who looked troubled, and explained to my sister, "James is merely an advisor without any executive rights. I'm an executive director, but I was also made president. Our father-in-law, the founder, had always been the president, but when he retired, he made me an executive director and president. The other executives appreciated my performance, so there was no opposition. On the other hand, my husband, thanks to his father's arrangement, was receiving an executive salary as an advisor without executive rights, which is more of a pity than a mere employee. Even though it's called an executive salary, since he wasn't really doing any work, it was less than what an ordinary employee would get. So, I was bearing all the living expenses. James, who didn't care about our household finances, didn't even bother to know whether the house he was living in was company-owned or belonged to his father. Although our home was company-owned, my responsible father-in-law had always charged me rent. I thought of it as a normal rental property. The lawyer, still laughing, asked me, "Can we continue to rent this house to James?" My sister reacted to the rent part of the lawyer's question. "What do you mean by rent? Are you suggesting that I take rent from James? Isn't it the company's property? Just make it free." The lawyer presented the rent amount, laughing heartily at her words. She was shocked to see the figure, and so was James, who seemed to be hearing about it for the first time. "Guess a house this big does have a high rent," he muttered. "I can't afford that with my salary," James admitted, realizing his executive compensation would barely leave any money after paying the rent. Covering their living expenses would be hard. Over the 5 years of our marriage, James had used up all his modest executive compensation. My salary also disappeared in high rent and living expenses, leaving hardly any assets. Splitting the savings was the only option for asset division. After the lawyer left, my sister, now aware that the mansion she had hoped for was actually rented, seemed utterly deflated, staring blankly. James was grinning as usual. I suggested, "Why don't we vacate this place and go back to your parents' house? Your mother was so happy about the pregnancy news." James agreed, but I laughed at the thought of why I had to consider this man, who was about to be my ex, this much. I started worrying whether this unreliable man could raise a child, but I decided to leave it as it was none of my business. I asked my sister, who seemed to have forgotten about her own alimony, "Are you okay with the alimony payment, sis? You seem pretty confident, but you're also paying your ex-husband, right?" She was stunned to hear this, her face suddenly snapping back to reality. "Alimony? I have to pay it too." She was astonished, seemingly having heard nothing of the earlier discussion. "You said, 'I'll give plenty of alimony,' but you weren't expecting me to pay it, right? My salary is really low." James and my sister exchanged surprised glances. Though not a lawyer, watching these two made me want to burst into laughter. I had already obtained signatures on the divorce papers and alimony request documents. Seeing James and my sister like this was pathetic. My ex-husband, who had remarried my sister, had returned to his parents' home, just as I had warned. But there seemed to be constant quarrels between my sister and my in-laws. The main cause of the conflict was the lie about my sister being pregnant with my ex-husband's child. His mother, who was hoping for an heir, was extremely angry. My father-in-law, who had disliked my sister for stealing his son from me from the very beginning, hadn't even spoken to her. He fronted the alimony for James, and I was paid in full. But my sister, seeing this, pleaded with him, "Dad, could you please pay my alimony as well?" To this, the father-in-law responded, "I have no reason to be called Dad by you." He was fuming. Not being able to obtain anything she had hoped for, my sister ran away from my ex-husband's family home without a word and went missing. She had practically remarried the ex-husband just to bear the burden of alimony, which was utterly foolish. My ex-husband seemed to consider getting back with me, but his father scolded him. "You're the kind of man who should never even think about having a family. You can't even take care of yourself properly." I wouldn't get back with my ex-husband even if he begged me. I had stopped believing in him when he cheated on me with my sister and was disgusted by his indifferent attitude during our discussions. He was dismissed from his executive position and is now working as a temporary employee. I've continued being the CEO, which is the core of my life. I don't even think about remarrying someone after the breakup. I've kept in touch with my father-in-law, receiving advice when needed. For now, I want to focus on the company, thinking of it as being married to it for the sake of my employees.